August 480 BCE, Thermopylae, Greece. Picture this. You're standing at the gates of the world. On one side, the sea. On the other, a cliff wall. And through that strip of rock and dust, the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever assembled is marching toward you. Hundreds of thousands of Persian soldiers, chariots, cavalry, the elite Immortals. An empire stretching from Egypt to the edge of India, come to erase Greece from the map. Leading them, Xerxes I, a king who has already swallowed nations whole, who bridged an entire sea just to reach you. The kind of power that doesn't negotiate. It commands. To Xerxes, this wasn't a battle, it was an announcement. Facing him, Leonidas I, king of Sparta, leading 7,000 Greeks, including 300 elite Spartans.
Hold your ground, men!
By every rule of ancient warfare, this should be over before it begins. Now watch what happens. For 7 days, the greatest army on earth was stopped cold by a few hundred men. Xerxes threw wave after wave. The pass held. And when Persia finally broke through, it wasn't because the Greeks were beaten. The blow came from somewhere Leonidas never expected. How did they hold for so long? And what finally ended it? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how. To understand Thermopylae, you need to understand the machine that was coming. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a reckoning. Xerxes' father, Darius, had already tried to crush Greece. In 490 BCE, his army landed at Marathon. His navy controlled the Aegean. The Greek city-states were divided, weak, and squabbling. Athens still beat him. An outnumbered Athenian force ran straight at the Persian lines, literally sprinted, and broke them. The Persians retreated. Greece survived. Darius never recovered from the humiliation. He spent the rest of his life rebuilding for a second attempt. He died before he could finish it. His son Xerxes inherited the army, the ambition, and the grudge. And Xerxes refused to do it small. He ordered 2 pontoon bridges constructed across the Hellespont, the strait separating Asia from Europe. Nearly a mile of warships lashed side by side, planked over with timber and soil, so an entire army could walk from one continent to the other. When a storm destroyed the first bridges, Xerxes ordered the sea whipped, 300 lashes, for defying him. He built new bridges. A canal was dug through a peninsula to save his fleet weeks of sailing. Supply depots stretched across Thrace and Macedonia. This wasn't logistics. It was an empire rearranging geography. Modern scholars estimate his army at somewhere between 120,000 and 300,000 soldiers. Even the low end was a number Greece had never faced. City-state after city-state watched that horizon and bent the knee. They sent Xerxes earth and water, the symbols of submission, their land, their rivers. Yours now, great king. Most of Greece folded, but 2 cities refused, Athens and Sparta. Both had thrown Persian envoys into pits when Darius first sent them. That act alone was a declaration of war. Now the war was here. And here's what people miss about Thermopylae. Leonidas didn't march with only 300 men because Sparta didn't have more. He marched with 300 because Sparta was celebrating. The Carnea, a sacred festival honoring Apollo, was underway. Spartan law forbade military campaigns during religious festivals. That same law had caused Sparta to miss the Battle of Marathon 10 years earlier. But the situation was too urgent to wait. The ephors, Sparta's ruling council, gave Leonidas special permission. Not a full mobilization, a forward force. Take the royal bodyguard, march north, hold the pass. buy time for the festival to end and the full army to follow. There was also the oracle. Before Leonidas left, the oracle at Delphi delivered its verdict. Either Sparta falls or a king of Sparta must die. Leonidas understood exactly what that meant. He didn't select the 300 based on skill alone. He chose men who already had sons, men whose families would continue without them. He was not assembling a fighting force. He was assembling a sacrifice. Leonidas himself was around 60 years old. He had not expected to become king. He was the third of 4 sons, not the obvious heir. But fate had other plans, as did Xerxes. En route to Thermopylae, allied contingents joined him: Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, Corinthians, and others. By the time the Greek force reached the pass, it numbered over 7,000. City-states who understood the same thing Leonidas understood. If Xerxes reached the south, there would be no south left. They marched into the pass, and then they waited. Thermopylae means hot gates. Named for the sulfur springs that bubble up there, the smell of something ancient and volcanic. Modern visitors are surprised by how it looks today. Centuries of silt have pushed the sea back. The land is wide and flat. But in 480 BCE, that corridor between the cliffs and the Malian Gulf was barely 100 meters wide at its broadest point. At the narrowest section, the middle gate, where Leonidas planted his line, it squeezed to almost nothing. Think about what that does to an army of thousands. Numbers don't help you if you can only fit 50 men abreast. Cavalry is useless on ground hemmed in by sheer rock. Archers lose their value when the enemy is 10 feet in front of you. Persia's greatest weapons, overwhelming mass, shock cavalry, volume arrow fire, were neutralized the moment they entered that corridor. The Greeks also had a wall. Built years earlier by the Phocians to defend against Thessalian raids, it had fallen into disrepair. Leonidas set his men to rebuilding it the day before battle. A fixed line, an anchor point, a place to stand and not move. He also knew about the mountain path, the Anopeia Trail, a route through the hills above the pass that bypassed the Greek position entirely. Local people from Trachis had told him it existed. He posted 1,000 Phocian soldiers on the heights to guard it. He thought that was enough. For 4 days after arriving, Xerxes waited. He sent a scout first. The Persian rider approached the Greek camp, circled, observed, and left without being stopped. His report baffled Xerxes. The Spartans weren't preparing for battle. They were combing their hair, stretching, exercising, moving without urgency. Xerxes summoned Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king, in his retinue, and asked what it meant. Demaratus didn't flinch. These men are preparing to fight and to die. When Spartans dress their hair, it means they are about to risk their lives. Xerxes laughed. He sent an envoy to offer terms instead. Lay down your arms. Accept the title Friends of the Persian People. Keep your lives. Leonidas sent 2 words back, molon labe, come and take them. Xerxes waited 4 more days, still expecting the Greeks to come to their senses, to look at the size of what was coming and simply walk away. They didn't move. On the 5th day, Xerxes attacked. He sent the Medes and Scythians first, 10,000 men. Orders: take the defenders prisoner and bring them before the king alive. The Greek phalanx met them at the narrowest point. Imagine you're a Persian soldier in that first wave. You've been part of the army that swallowed Egypt, that crossed the Hellespont on a bridge of ships, that made nations kneel without a fight. You march into the pass. and suddenly there is a wall of bronze in front of you. Overlapping shields, edge to edge, sealing the corridor completely. 8-foot spears layered forward in staggered rows. The front rank protected by the shields of the men directly behind them.
Here they die!
You push. They hold. You push harder. They rotate. Fresh soldiers stepping forward as tired ones fall back. Disciplined, mechanical, relentless. You're not fighting men. You're fighting a machine built for exactly this terrain. Xerxes reportedly stood up from his throne 3 times while watching the slaughter. Not in celebration, in horror. The Medes fell back. Xerxes sent fresh troops. Same result. So he made his next call.
The Immortals.
10,000 elite professionals, Persia's finest soldiers. Their name came from their numbers. When one fell, another immediately replaced him. The force never shrank, never weakened. They were, on paper, unkillable. Mostly native Persian, with Median and Elamite warriors mixed in. Within their ranks sat the hardest core, the king's spear-bearers, nobles armed with golden butted lances, the personal guard of Xerxes himself. They had never failed. They entered the pass expecting to end this in minutes. Though the challenge was greater, the result was the same. The phalanx rotated, the spears held, the line didn't move. The Immortals fell back. For 2 full days, the greatest army the ancient world had ever assembled broke itself against a few hundred meters of Greek bronze. Xerxes had tried his standard infantry. He had tried his elite. He had tried mass, momentum, and pressure from every angle available in that pass. Nothing worked. And then, on the second night, a man walked into the Persian camp. His name was Ephialtes of Trachis, a local man, a Greek, someone who knew the mountains above Thermopylae the way you know your own street. He came to Xerxes and offered what no Persian scout had found, a path through the hills. The Anopeia Trail, curving high above the pass, bypassing the Greek wall entirely, coming out directly behind Leonidas's position. His motive was the reward, simple greed. For that, his name became, in the Greek language, the word for nightmare. It still means that today. Xerxes sent the Immortals up the path that night, thousands of soldiers moving in darkness through mountain terrain, guided by a traitor. At dawn, the 1,000 Phocians guarding the heights heard them. Not voices, not footsteps. The rustling of oak leaves being crushed underfoot. The Phocians scrambled for their weapons. The Immortals didn't know who they were facing. For a moment, both sides froze. Then the Persians loosed arrows. Not to destroy, to push through. The Phocians, assuming they were the main target, pulled back to higher ground to sell their lives dearly. The Persians walked past them without stopping. The path was open. Leonidas received the news before sunrise. Runners came in from the heights. His own lookouts confirmed it at dawn. The Persians were behind them. He called a council. Most of the allied contingents were ordered to withdraw, or chose to on their own. Thebans, Corinthians, Arcadians, over 4,000 men left the pass. They would fight again at Plataea. Their lives still had use. The 300 Spartans stayed. 700 Thespians refused to leave. Their city lay directly in Xerxes' path. If Boeotia fell, Thespia would burn. They had nothing to go back to. They chose to die here. In a moment the world would remember, rather than later, in a moment it wouldn't. Some Thebans remained too, perhaps loyal ones, perhaps hostages. The sources disagree. around 2,000 soldiers total. They knew what the morning would bring. This was no longer about holding the pass. The pass was already lost. This was something else. At dawn, Xerxes made libations. He waited for the Immortals to descend the mountain and close the trap from behind. Then he ordered the full advance from the front. Leonidas made one final decision. Instead of fighting defensively behind the wall, he moved his men forward, into the wider section of the pass. All of them, advancing, not holding, attacking. If they were going to die, they would die killing as many Persians as possible. They would not crouch behind a wall and wait to be surrounded. They would run at the empire. The Greeks pushed forward so hard that Herodotus records 2 of Xerxes' own brothers fell in the fighting, cut down in the press of combat. Leonidas died in that assault, shot down by Persian archers deep in the enemy line. What followed was one of the most ferocious struggles in ancient history. The Greeks fought to reclaim his body. They pushed the Persians back 4 times. 4 times they drove into the enemy formation and took him back. When their spears shattered, they drew swords. When swords were gone, they used their hands, their teeth. The Immortals arrived from the rear. The Thebans broke away, hands raised, surrendering. Many were cut down before their surrender was accepted. The survivors were branded with Xerxes' royal mark. The remaining Greeks, Spartans and Thespians together, fell back to a small hill behind the wall. Xerxes gave the final order. Persian archers covered the hill until nothing moved. The pass was open. Here's where you have to be honest about what happened. Thermopylae was not a Greek victory. The pass fell. Xerxes marched south. Athens was evacuated and burned. The Acropolis looted and set on fire. If you measure by territory held, objectives achieved, armies saved, this was a defeat. The ancient historians knew it. The modern scholars say it plainly. And yet, something happened in that pass that changed the war. Not the time bought, probably just a few days, since Xerxes spent most of the following weeks methodically reducing Greek resistance. What changed was the story. Thermopylae proved something that hadn't been proven before. Persia bleeds. The Immortals, unkillable on paper, had been turned back by men who knew they were already dead. The math of empire had been made to look like a lie. Greek soldiers across the alliance had watched 300 men hold for 3 days against everything Xerxes had, and choose to stay even when they could have left. Thermopylae didn't save Greece, but Thermopylae gave a civilization the story it needed to believe it could win. Leonidas knew he was going to die. He went anyway. He picked men with living sons. He held the pass until there was no pass left to hold. And then he ran at the empire with everything he had. 2,500 years later, you're still watching. That story spread like fire. And 6 weeks later, at Salamis, the Greek fleet lured the Persian navy into narrow straits. One man with a plan so audacious, so deliberately insane, that even his own allies thought he'd lost his mind. His name was Themistocles, and he was about to lure the most powerful navy in the world into a trap it couldn't see coming. Here's what you need to know. Xerxes was so confident, he built a throne on a hillside so he could watch his fleet destroy the Greeks in comfort. He never considered the possibility that the throne would give him a front-row seat to something else entirely. The Battle of Salamis, where the fate of the Greek world was decided in a single afternoon, on water, in a narrow strait, with everything on the line. Watch it now.